Is Ian Garry a cuck, or are we just all projecting, right? I want to talk about what makes a cuck a cuck. Now, to me, the definition I know, a cuck is a guy that likes to watch his wife have sex with other people. Now, I think there's very few men on this earth that would actually submit themselves to that torture. I'm definitely not one of them. I really, really value the person that I'm in a relationship with, and the thought of my girlfriend sleeping with another person, or I guess my ex now sleeping with another person, always made me sick to my stomach. So I'm certainly not, I don't want to make it sound like I'm a cuck, and I'm defending Ian Garry like, hey, this guy, you know, coming from a legion of cucks here, a fellow cuck in the I don't know, what the Council of Cucks. I'm not trying to shoot him bail, but I think we should be a little bit less liberal with using the term cuck. Adam22, Sneeko, those guys might actually be cucks. But since the genesis of this new weird kind of wave of media personalities that are okay with watching their significant others have sex with other people in front of them, everyone's kind of just been throwing that word around willy-nilly. And the reason I want to make this video is because I saw Ian Garry had done a recent interview. The interviewer asked him about the situation with his wife's ex-boyfriend, the world-class nutritionist that of course lives with them. It's a little bit crazy, I'm not gonna lie. And he had this to say. Roll the clip.
He is a professional in one regard. He's also the father of my wife's son. And I never want to be a wedge between a father and a son. I never want that in my conscience. So I know that we're going on this adventure to travel the world. Hey dude, want to travel the world? Be my nutritionist and we can all do this together. We can, you can come and see your son whenever you want. You guys can be there. The two of them are on to Disney this morning. And that's the energy I have. I want to be a good human. I want to be a good man. And I never want to be a wedge between a father and a son. Because I know if someone was to be a wedge between me and my son, I'd be livid. I'd be livid, and I'd hate that person.
Now, this clip made me think, and it made me pause, right? I'm not the biggest Ian Garry hater in the world. I think some of the stuff he said is very, very delusional. And if I had to stake a guess, that would probably be what's going on here. Now, a lot of times in relationships, people get labeled as cucks, when in reality, I think it's more so the dynamic at play. So if you asked Ian Garry if he was secure in his relationship, he would most likely say yes, right? I think at a glance, a lot of people would say yes if his wife's ex-boyfriend is living with them, even if it is under the pretext that you just saw, where Ian Garry wanted his kid to have his father figure in his life. I think it's a very wholesome thing of him to do. Even in those circumstances, the dynamic there is what can cause an issue. For as much as I hate to say, there is probably another factor there that I think Layla is her name, is kind of benefiting from. Now, I'm not going to claim to know their relationship, but I do know that when you do have an ex and there is a child involved, I can only imagine that there's a slew of different feelings going on. Does his nutritionist actually have to live with them? Absolutely not. All these things I'm trying to say is that I don't think if I were in Ian Garry's shoes, I would want all this stuff happening. But do I think that makes him a cuck? No. Do I think that makes him delusional? Yeah. And I've had a relationship like this before where someone has said, oh, you know, there's this old guy from high school I used to know, and he used to pick on me, and I want to get coffee with him because I want to see how much of a train wreck his life has become, right? That's suspicious, considering those two people did things in the past together. That's something that would make me say, and I should have known at the time, hey, yeah, there's probably more feelings there than just wanting to see if this guy's life has turned into a disaster. But when you're in the throes of a relationship, at least I wasn't thinking like that. And if Ian really feels the way he portrays himself feeling about her, I don't think it's too far-fetched when you're in a relationship like that to cope a little bit. Because Ian Garry can say to himself, and again, I think it's a very, I do respect Ian Garry a lot for that, allowing the father of his stepson to still be in the son's life. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think there is also a certain level of cope that's involved, right? Where it's like, does the guy really have to live with us, considering all the things that we've seen and things that have come out about his wife? I'm not even trying to put things on her, right? These are all things you can go, just look up Layla Machado Garry and see the things that pop up, right? These are not stretches. These are things that she's really said. Considering all of that stuff, if I were Ian Garry, and let's just say I get an eagle view on the relationship once it's over, I would probably look back on those things and say, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about the ex-boyfriend staying with us, right? Even if he is my nutritionist, staying in the same house. That's a risk. That's a hazard. That's not being a cuck, but that's risking your wife. You know, if you're out in Australia fighting on some card and your nutritionist is back at the house watching his kid with your wife, I mean, that's a risk. And honestly, that's a headache too. I'm not ruling out the possibility that Ian can be that secure in himself and in his relationship to have an ex stay with them, and maybe they have, I mean, like, stranger things have happened. But the real reason I want to make this video is because I think we need to stop calling this guy a cuck. I do not think that, I mean, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Maybe that's the case. I think we pump the brakes on that and instead look at it more from a constructive viewpoint, where it's like, okay, we're presented with this information about the relationship. We know how his wife handles things. We know how she kind of operates. And we know how Ian Garry, and to be fair, we know that you have to kind of be a certain level of delusional to make it up to the highest points in life. He might just be a little bit delusional about the situation. It's not, I just don't think that that makes him a cuck. I really don't. I don't know, maybe that's a confidence thing for Garry. Maybe he has found this woman that he's madly in love with and she understands that and she's utilizing that to her advantage. Or it could be that there's no malice there at all. I don't know, but the only thing I feel like is that we just really shouldn't be throwing cuck around. Hey, so what is going on, guys? It is your boy here, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard guy, Jacob Cooperman, and we have more of a somber video today, more of a disturbing kind of video, because I was originally going to talk about the ongoing train wreck that is the Ryan Garcia situation in the lead up to his bout with Devin Haney, but things just took a really weird turn. Let's get into it.
I don't give a fuck, bro. They held me down and they made me watch little kids get raped. I don't give a fuck anymore. Bro, they fucking took me to the fucking woods, bro, and they fucking tied... I'm not fucking joking, bro. I have fucking proof, bro. I don't give a fuck. Bro, I fucking will show you every fucking video you could ever fucking believe. Bohemian Grove is real. They fucking tied me down and they made me fucking watch, dog.
Now, what I just played for you are snippets from a Twitter live space in which Andrew Tate, who, I gotta be honest, I didn't even know had access to a phone, talks directly to Ryan Garcia following his pseudo disappearance. As I'm led to believe, he didn't have access to his phone, and he came out in a video and said that and his credit cards had been essentially neutralized.
Hey guys, it's me, Ryan. I'm coming on here to explain what's going on. I'm not in possession of my phone. I can't get access to my Instagram. My cards are locked. And I'm just being real, I'm being real taken advantage.
So this comes after all that, and after, quite frankly, a very disturbing couple of weeks in which his face has swelled up, the quality of his interviews has dropped severely, and quite frankly, you get a vibe that we're not seeing Ryan Garcia. Now, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy nut. I don't want to come off as if I'm saying that he got taken. What I do find weird is some of the things that Ryan said in the live and how you can kind of draw the comparison to what a lot of other celebrities and figures who go through the same thing say. Because if you look at the parallels, it's actually really, really unsettling. Now, Ryan mentions heavily in this little chit chat that he has with Andrew Tate a few things that I've found across the board when these celebrities say, hey, the Illuminati is trying to get me, right? He mentions Bohemian Grove, which is a proven event that takes place somewhere, I think, in the Redwoods of California. He alleges that they tied him down and he watched as they raped minors and did a bunch of other sadistic things, as well as he himself being a victim of that same activity when he was younger. That's the first thing that he alleges that I find is a lot of overlap with a lot of these celebrities that come out in protest of this shady Illuminati type group.
You know the path
Andrew,
you're going down is dangerous, my friend. That's
I
what
don't
I'm
give
worried
a
about.
fuck. I don't give a fuck. They can't touch me. I'm a god.
Well, that's the first point of contention, because I care about you a lot, and I can assure you from my own personal experience that they can touch you.
Then the other thing is God, which I think is awesome if you are a devout Christian to love Jesus. So I'm not saying this to say like it's a sham to kind of big up and say I'm in Jesus Christ's name. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I noticed that when a lot of big celebrities seem to crash out like this, one main common theme that I always see is that they are constantly referencing in Jesus' name. You could check, at the Devin Haney press conference, you could check, there's so many instances after this weird activity started. I can't speak to before, but I certainly know after this weird activity started, if nothing else, he is mentioning Jesus a lot more. And the third and final, which I kind of hate to say, is what Andrew Tate loves to reference all the time, is that the Matrix or whoever it is now out to get this person. Garcia has said that he has received calls. Of course, they already kind of got to him.
They're already calling me to tell me to stop. I don't give a fuck, dude. I've already had a meeting with them.
He references them trying to find him, giving him calls, telling him to stop, and that he is now kind of this like pseudo on the run speaker of the truth, and he's going to expose this global group. Now, again, I'm not here to refute the existence of this group. They very well could be. It very well could be that he's just been on a drug binge. Maybe he's having a psychotic break because the pressure is getting to him. I don't know what's going on. And I think only those that are really close to Ryan really know what's going on. And most likely, whatever it is, global cabal, drugs, psychotic break. If I'm Ryan's reps, I'm saying, let's try to damage control this situation to the best of our ability. Obviously, you don't have complete and full control over someone as their brand manager, as their agent, as their PR team. All we have in front of us and all we know for sure is that Ryan Garcia has been acting strange. He looks different. His face is puffed up. I saw his weird facial tics, which is something I didn't see get mentioned a lot. Could be a stress thing that's very consistent with drug use, with uppers that make you kind of twitch, you know what I mean? I saw a lot of like, yeah, I mean, it really could be either of those. And that's kind of why I wanted to make this video. There's so much mystery around all of this. Now, obviously, the fight's also in jeopardy. A lot of people are debating whether or not Ryan Garcia should even be fighting Devin Haney right now. I tend not to think so. I agree with Wade. I think he takes time off of the sport. I think there's still time for him to have a beautiful and fruitful career. But whatever is going on with Ryan Garcia now, even if it is the Illuminati knocking on his door, you're not going to be preoccupied with a boxing match. I don't know, when you got Andrew Tate in a call and he's the one that seems a little bit more wary of this matrix as he did in that call, that made me kind of pause and kind of say, okay, what really is happening? Out of respect to the situation, if Ryan really is going through some struggles with drug use right now or whatever it is, or if this is just some sort of an elite level troll, I won't speculate on whether or not there's, again, an involvement from some big global cabal here, but it certainly gave me a chill up my spine. Something feels very uneasy about this situation. It is kind of strange that a lot of these cases have big overlapping themes. There's also a lot of references of Ryan Garcia releasing this information at the perfect time, that he does have a lot of information and a lot of proof at his disposal to use in this situation. I honestly think that a lot of that is kind of, it's another common occurrence you see in a lot of these cases where celebrities will say, I have the proof, and nothing ever comes out. The fight is supposed to take place April 20th, so we have some time for this all to play out. I'm going to be watching, reviewing, hopefully doing a follow-up video. Hopefully Ryan's okay. I hope the follow-up video I do make is going to be a lot more positive in nature. I hope that this is, I mean, there's no real good scenario here. I guess the best scenario would be that this was like an elite level troll, right? And Ryan says, gotcha. You know, this is a great marketing build-up for the fight, and it's certainly working if that's the case. I just hope his mental's doing okay. I hope we get to see him perform, because regardless of the fact of how many people hate on this kid, he has talent. I don't think anyone would debate that fact. So hopefully we can see him back in this ring. But without further ado, it's been your boy, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Cooper. Looking pale as a ghost today. Jesus, it's the overhead lighting. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy here, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Cooperman, and we have to talk about the absolute atrocity that occurred last night. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I mean, first of all, it was a very eye-opening experience, because I watched this fight in a bar, and everyone and their mother in that bar was not only rooting for Jake to lose, but actively talking about their disdain for him as a human being. It's kind of crazy in that, like, maybe I'm just more of, I wouldn't say a Jake Paul fan, but I'm a guy that, like, enjoys what he does and can appreciate what he brings to the sport. It was kind of wild to me just to hear how many people disliked him, and to the extent that they disliked him. Because, again, you know, I think the running narrative right now is that, yeah, Jake is running out of steam. With his last couple fights, he was fighting no names, and when he fought an actual boxer, he got destroyed. This fight, and I said this from the jump, could have been a great way for Jake to show that he's still a draw. He's fighting a guy in Mike Tyson, and we have all the aspects. I feel like the bones were there of a really good Jake Paul fight. Everyone wants to see him lose. He's fighting a high-profile opponent, an old opponent, a guy that can't move that well. Albeit Mike looked good in sparring, but still, I mean, everything was there for Jake. And it seemed like, I suppose that it was kind of a throwback to the beginning of Jake's career, when, again, he was drumming up all of this controversy surrounding his fights. And you had people, I mean, I had friends texting me that don't even watch fighting, that were watching a fight, being like, I hope Jake Paul gets knocked the fuck out. That's the level of platform that Jake had here. It was a sold-out crowd in the Cowboys' home stadium. The spotlight was big, and Jake had to deliver. Unfortunately, he didn't. Now, let's let's talk about the fight. Jake Paul jabbed through a couple of 3 or 4 punch combinations and circled out nonstop for 16 minutes. And he was gassed by the end of it. He wasn't able to finish, however old Mike is, Mike Tyson, probably 50s or 60s. The fight was so bad that people were now talking about the fact that it could potentially be rigged, which again, I don't know. It's a mixture of things for me because Mike just looked scared to throw. Mike looked scared to kind of enter into the pocket and really commit to anything. It seemed like, and I described this to my friend, it seemed like the lateral movements he was making when he was getting his head off the center line and kind of, moving forward into the pocket like this were great. It seemed like where the big difference was, and I think age had a large part to do with this, when it came to exploding off of that motion and hitting Jake with combinations, Mike didn't really have anything in the tank for that, or it seemed just like that Jake was keeping a really, really good distance. His range management was really good. Again, it's against Mike Tyson, so you're going to want to take a step back even in his older age, but Jake would kind of just take a step back and be out of the way like nothing happened. And that was the entire fight. So I think it became discouraging for Mike to be able to kind of throw and be successful. He had a few different connections early on in the fight that looked good. But for the most part, again, Jake stayed on the outside. He picked Mike off with his jab. And when he felt like he wanted to pressure a bit more was when he'd throw the odd out 3 or 4 punch combination. Besides that, it almost looked like a light spar. And I just feel like bringing it back to the topic at hand here, this is something where Jake, I will agree with my original assessment in that this is a big platform for him. And it would have been a good moment if he had, let's just say, knocked out Mike Tyson, or they had an exciting fight. I was even saying to my friend, like, I don't think that getting knocked out by Mike Tyson would damage Jake Paul's legacy quite the way this outcome has. So he has this big platform. He doesn't really do anything with it. Everyone still hates him. I mean, let's be honest. I'm sitting here being like, all right, well, where does he go from here? I saw on Twitter he was calling out Conor McGregor for a non-weight class fight in MMA, as if that's ever going to happen. I think McGregor probably sooner face him in boxing, I'd imagine. Of course, he's going to be in the smart cage for PFL soon, so I'm excited to see who they get him in there with. It doesn't really, I'm not seeing a lot of options right now for Jake to be picking and calling out fights. To me, after a performance like that, after you come out, you trash talk, you build everything up, Mike slaps him at weigh-ins, you can't leave with that type of a bad taste in everyone's mouth and expect to just get traffic the next time around. It's also tough because Mike Tyson's a huge name. So if this were someone where it was like a big name, but not as big of a name as Mike Tyson, like a Conor McGregor, where there's still options to kind of one up that after the fact with a bigger name, I might be sitting here and having a different tune, but where the hell do you go from Mike Tyson? Jake has shown that he's unable to finish, again, an old man in Mike Tyson. He's not going to be getting a lot of offers from low-level or amateur boxers or boxers that are, 5-2 on the pro scene. The only option, I think, for Jake is to go for shock and name value now. But even that seems to be an option that's going to run dry soon. And so for the first time, I think in Jake's career, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I don't know where he goes from here. We've also seen when he fights guys that are more credited but lesser known, like Andre August or Ryan Borland, nobody really cares. Nobody shows up to the fights. I think personally where Jake went wrong was he went in a right direction. I think the going for bigger names, fights that aren't going to be, like, Jake's never going to contend for a title. Let's just get that out of the way. But going for fights like this, where it's like, all right, yeah, it's a big name. He used to be a massive, and still is to a certain extent, a massive celebrity within the sport of boxing and in entertainment. Going for those types of names is, I think, honestly, what he should be doing. It's the fact that he almost bit off more than he could chew here, took too big of a name, and didn't deliver when the lights were brightest and when he needed to. He knocks out Mike Tyson. People are going to want to see him get knocked out even more. He gets knocked out by Mike Tyson. I think people would probably tune into his next fight to trash talk him or see if he's able to recover. Again, that's not great, but it's better than what happened last night, which was a fight where it was 16 minutes. Again, it looked like a light spar, and everyone that watched in the bar walked out and onto the street. And people were not only quiet, but when the conversation picked back up, they were all talking about how bad it was. I think his best move is to just now move into MMA. He has that deal on the table with PFL. I think he cashes that in, and there's a ton of really, really interesting matchups for him in the sport of MMA. And I feel like celebrity or influencer MMA is not something that we see really enough of right now. Could get the same type of celebrity boxing treatment, or just go back to maybe fighting YouTubers. It's not a bad idea. Misfits is going to have that really, really interesting super card coming up. I think Jake can get back in the mix there and maybe maybe have a bit more success. I think, honestly, a lot of people would be very, very interested in seeing, myself included, hey, maybe have a rematch with Gibb or go up against Slims, blah, blah, blah. Any of these guys that are still in the scene. Hey, we still got that KSI fight that's on the table. I want to see that. But I think this time of Jake kind of dabbling and being half foot in, half foot out of the real boxing world probably needs to come to a close. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. But for now, it has been your boy, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard guy, Jacob Cooperman, and I'll see you in the next episode. What's going on, guys? It is your boy here, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard guy, Jacob Cooperman. In this video, I want to talk about UFC 300 because, my God, was that probably one of the best UFC cards I've ever seen in my life. And I think a lot of the MMA world and even some of the non-MMA worlds would tend to agree with me. But realistically, like, how much of an effect has this had on the sport? And that was a question I started to mull over in my brain as I showered last night. And I literally had to write it down on my phone because there's so much context, so many different building blocks here that could take the sport in new directions, could take the weight classes in new directions. So many new storylines, so many new characters developing for the plot. It's crazy. So I wanted to start off, obviously, with Max Holloway. He had a career-defining moment and a career of career-defining moments. I don't want to sound like I'm just copying blatantly Dana White, but it's true. He had a moment that will go down in the history books. Joe Rogan on the broadcast was saying that's one of the best knockouts in UFC history. I tend not to think so. If you just turned the sound off and you had no context for the moment, it would be an average knockout. But the moment surrounding it is what made it special, and that's really what I want to get into. To do that to Justin Gaethje, albeit, again, he had Gaethje hurt a number of times. Gaethje had him hurt a couple of times in that fight. It was a grueling back and forth war. We've never seen Gaethje like that. I turned, because I was watching my friend, I turned to him, and it was one of those UFC moments, and all my fans know what I'm talking about. It's just one of those moments where you're watching and you're like this. Max Holloway up at lightweight. Think about how many more opportunities that presents for Max and for these weight classes, man. That's so many interesting matchups waiting to happen. He got Ilia Topuria down at featherweight. The UFC is probably going to provoke a chance to get his belt back, but think about the matchup with Ilia. Think about the matchup with pretty much anyone in the top 5 at lightweight now. There's so many fun matchups. Arman Tsarukyan, if they want to keep him on ice while Dustin Poirier and Makhachev duke it out, they could have him face Holloway. Holloway is also such a big money fight now. I didn't know it was possible for him to step up, because he was already a legend, in my personal opinion, in the UFC and in the world of MMA, to take a step up in the way that he's regarded by the community. He's managed to find that next notch. He's also in his prime. Are you kidding me? He hurt Gaethje. That's insane. Another really good byproduct of this fight is that it's legitimized the BMF title. That's the most quintessentially BMF moment ever. Max is up on the cards and decides to duke it out with Justin Gaethje, who thrives in that environment. 10 seconds left in a fight where he could have just cruised, and gets that big moment. New precedent set as well for the UFC. If Dana wants to incentivize fighters to have better fights, you hand him more money for performance bonuses. Next, Alex Pereira. Poatan, one of the scariest fucking fighters I've ever seen in my life, and a guy that is fast-tracking his way to potential GOAT status. It's kind of the same thing with Max, where it's like you have now 3 divisions, potentially, that we know Alex could make the weight at handily, and that we know he can be a part of great fights in, of entertaining fights in. I want to see him, because I know he mentioned in the post-fight going up to heavyweight, fighting Jones, potentially fighting Aspinall. Those are really interesting matchups, and I'm curious to see where his power, where Poatan's power ends. Like, is it going to be at heavyweight, where these guys are accustomed to fighting dudes with gigantic overhands and guys that throw for power? I think you can find plenty of possible suitors in that heavyweight division. And at the upper echelon, there's just so many fun fights. Cyril Gane, I would absolutely love to see that fight. Jardinia Rosenstrike, who's another kickboxing guy. I personally would not be unhappy with that fight. I mean, I'd love to see him down at light heavyweight, just defend a few more times. But if he wants to go up to heavyweight, I mean, who's going to deny that man at this point? He's an absolute astronomical name within the sport of MMA right now. To be fair, that was a lot of what I have written down here. Is Kayla Harrison injecting new life into women's bantamweight. Aljo, there's so many new new and interesting matchups that you can explore now with him at 145 pounds. Diego Lopez, absolute monster, got a lot of exposure on this card. He's an absolute dog, and I have to be honest, I knew about him, but I was not familiar with his game to the extent that I now am, and I will definitely be going back in UFC Fight Pass and watching a ton of his fights, because my God, does that man know how to put on an entertaining fight. It's a very high-profile win over a tough guy on the biggest stage, by the way. Yan Xiaonan and Zhang Weili, both absolute dogs. The first all-Chinese title fight in UFC history did not disappoint. Absolute slapperino of a fight, of a matchup. And both women came out looking really good. Both of them really just battled through a ton of adversity, and I think really broke a lot of the stigma around women's fighting. A lot of the women that I watch fight are absolute scrapyard dogs. They get after it, right? But it's about finding entertaining fights. Yuri Prochazka looks awesome, dude. Oh my goodness. Talk about a light heavyweight machine. I don't know what Yuri does next. I know that they were talking about him versus Hill. That's a really fun fight. But Yuri's still here. I like him because he fights like you just took his favorite remote. I think he's a really fun guy to watch, and the sport is better with him in it. And Hill's a top name still, in my personal opinion, after this loss. I'm still going to be interested to see him fight. I think he proved that he can be a part of these big moments, for better or for worse, because a lot of people are trashing him online right now. But the buzz, and that brings me to my last point, the buzz about this card was absolutely insane. This is the best possible scenario that I think could have happened for UFC 300, a card where a lot of people were doubting it. It seemed thrown together. It seemed tacky. A lot of people were getting really, really angry, really disappointed. It came through, and on the biggest stage, MMA picked up undoubtedly a whole ton more fans. While it's not one of my personal best cards that I've seen, it's definitely in the top 10, I think. I'd have to go back in my Rolodex of a mind to go and think back to some of the most iconic cards in history. I think it will be one of the most influential cards that the UFC has had. And if you're talking about a milestone like this, 300, that's what you want it to be, right? They talked a lot in the lead up about innovation and the sport, and this is the next step. And the card was designed perfectly to do just that. I got to tip my cap to Uncle Dana, pop open the oil, celebrate, and without further ado, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Deuces. It might be time for influencer boxing to roll over and die. I've made plenty of videos talking about how I thought that there'd be a bright future for the sport. So in the interest of not making myself seem like a hypocrite, of course, I have to preface this by saying my views have changed. I watched some highlights of the last Misfits series, and man, talk about a lack of names. The biggest name in terms of name value was Vitaly in the last card. He looked absolutely horrible. The biggest name with what I believe to be the most amount of sellability, or the name that you can create the most amount of plot lines around, would have been Taylor Holder on that card. He got a lackluster knockout. So not only was it not a compelling night of fights, the quality of the fights themselves, the knockouts, didn't really speak to a lot of people. So that begs the question, was YouTube boxing a temporary solution to a long-term problem? A band-aid on a gunshot wound? Let's talk about it. So with the influencer boxing scene seemingly losing steam, that's a very hard sentence to say, by the way, I wanted to take a critical look at what events did well, what events didn't, and it was a pretty simple answer. The events in which the high-class names, KSI, Logan Paul, Jake Paul, Deji, were involved in did really well. Now there'll be names further down the ladder, BD Dave, Jarvis, right, King Kenny, that also draw in a fairly sizable crowd, but it seems like outside of the prime card that happened late last year, and outside of the diehard fans that enjoy the medium of influencer boxing, it seems that that particular subsection of combat sports is not getting any play recently. Now, I tried finding any viewership ratings on just the Misfits X DAZN series, the numbered ones, and I couldn't. I only found numbers on the bigger events, and I think that makes sense, but it also could speak to a problem that DAZN and Misfits are having. See, I want to go back to a time that was more simple, a time that I referenced at the beginning of the video, the advent of influencer boxing, a time when none of the influencers that practiced the sport were really good at it, quite frankly. There was a certain charm to that. You could watch your favorite influencer, whether they got into a beef or they just wanted money, step into the ring, look absolutely god-awful, and either knock someone out or get knocked out or get embarrassed in the process. And that was fine. That was great. Everyone had signed up for that and everyone was happy. There was a certain novelty, right, to watching these people put everything all out on the line. And I think that novelty was amplified by the fact that these guys really couldn't box. And now, I've said this in past videos, and I still do believe this to be the case. I think there's something great about these influencers that have stuck with the sport for so long and are getting better actively. Like, if you see a fight now, you could tell the guys that have been putting in work in the gym. And dare I say, the amount of influencers that have been doing this has increased, and therefore the quality of the fights have increased. And I think that's great in its own regard. I fear that now, as guys get better in the influencer scene, and as we don't have that same kind of endearing quality of, let's just say, what Creator Clash had, where these influencers would go in and swing haymakers at each other, guys that are really skilled and don't have that big of a following or a personality fighting on the undercards, don't actively serve to differentiate influencer boxing from regular boxing. See, I think what boxing was missing was personalities. There's plenty of boxers with personalities, but there's so many boxers, so many belts in total, right? You have to do a good job, and this is what the UFC does a fantastic job of. You have to market your athletes, right? Combat sports is all about storylines. People want to see the gladiatorial aspect of guys getting in there, putting it, again, all on the line, and they want big moments. As guys get more skilled, as they learn to parry, as they learn to block, as they learn to throw combinations, this fight's are going to get more skilled, more close. You do lose a little bit of the wildness that made influencer boxing so different, so new, so novel in the beginning. And, you know, thinking about that, that presents a different problem, because now that there's a certain level of skill that is to be expected from these influencers. I'll call back into mind the Prime card. That Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul fight was boring. There wasn't a lot of skill and technique. People shelled it, as they should have. That was a terrible fight to watch. I saw that there was a roundtable meeting on the Misfits channel, and a lot of people were talking about the fact that a lot of bigger names were coming in for paychecks. And honestly, I don't know what's better. Is it better for the sport if the big names take it seriously? Or is it better if influencer boxing is kind of used as a vehicle rather than an art form? And then talking about the big names, it's tough because outside of those big names, you have the guys, the B tiers like the King Kennys, the FaZe Jarvises, the My Mate Nates that you can latch onto if you're more of a dedicated fan. But how do you capture a wide audience if you don't have those big names? Influencer boxing, I don't think, has the names to sustain that. Or at least they have the names, perhaps, but My Mate Nate's going over here to one promotion. King Kenny's going over here to another promotion, right? Jarvis is all the way over there at another promotion. There's not enough continuity. There's not a solid enough base to facilitate athlete promotion to where you can get someone organically on KSI's level. That means bringing in big influencers from different areas. That means paying more money that I'm sure you get back because of free streaming. I mean, it's a system that's tough, and that's a system I've talked about on this channel before. You know, I saw some of the recent arenas that Misfits has been putting on shows in, and it is almost reminiscent of a BKFC when I've seen them kind of go to some of these more, for instance, I was in Manassas at the Salisbury Center. That seems like the type of venue that would house a Misfits event. Very small, very intimate, which is fine, but if you ask KSI and Mams Taylor the type of events they're going for, they're looking to put on stuff at the O2 Arena. Are they going to be able to get up to that level? I don't think so. And you can't just bank on the fact that KSI is going to be fighting on a card to make them big. Another thing about regular boxing, it's kind of re-entered the zeitgeist. So now you have fights like the Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney fight that have generated a mass amount of attention, and you don't need the KSIs anymore, the Logan Pauls, any of these guys. You get to see guys that are at the pinnacle of the sport duking it out. So Jamal Hill runs into Alex Pereira at the UFC PI. Chaos ensues. There's multiple different camera angles showcasing what happened, but I want to give my honest breakdown and thoughts on the video that only makes Jamal Hill look worse. Off the bat, Jamal Hill goes up. Alex Pereira is kind of hitting pads, sparring, something like that. Looks like he's been through a couple of rounds, probably just getting a workout in. Again, this is at the Performance Institute, so both guys are allowed in there. It's what a lot of athletes use at the UFC to kind of get their meals, get their workouts in, and make sure they're at optimal condition for their fights. Jamal Hill has a fight coming up. Makes sense that he'd be there. Alex Pereira is there with his pad holder, the big boy that we know and have come to love. And Jamal Hill's kind of alone. Walks up, says something nondescript to Alex Pereira. Now, towards the beginning of the video, it's kind of hard to see what both of them are saying to each other. But what is evident is that Jamal Hill opens with, "Not on Twitter now." Matter of fact, let me play you the video real quick for context.
Not on Twitter now.
After that, kind of tough to tell what's being said between the two gentlemen. Obviously, Alex Pereira doesn't speak a ton of English. Jamal Hill is almost pressing him a little bit like, hey, I want to fight you. And he's not necessarily being overly aggressive. I think that's something that we need to key in on. Not once when I was watching that video did I think that Jamal Hill was going to take a swing at Alex Pereira. A lot of these times when you see, and I've called to mind the multitude of different, tense face-offs that you could look at in UFC history, a lot of times you see guys, they're kind of, their shoulders are tense and they're getting ready into their stance and they're going to throw something. No, Jamal Hill walks up, confident body language, and Pereira's completely confused. He gives him daps, he gives him glove, and, is kind of like, all right, well, I've already beaten this guy handily. Sure, Jamal Hill has been running his mouth on Twitter a lot. I was originally going to make a video on that. But yeah, Alex, you can kind of tell is sitting there being like, I've beaten this guy already. Is this going to be an issue type of thing? But there's no real fear there in the eyes of Pereira. Matter of fact, he then picks up gloves, throws them at Jamal, and says, do you want to fight right now? We can go into the cage. There's a cage right to their lefts. Jamal then backs off and asserts that there needs to be money in the picture. And a lot of people are saying that this was Jamal Hill backing down from confrontation and that he was coming out of the gate really fiery and hot-headed. I think he wanted to press Alex Pereira. Did it seem like to me that he was looking for a physical conflict? No, I honestly, I don't think that Jamal had a plan in mind when he walked up on Alex Pereira. I think he just wanted to walk up on him, have a big moment for himself. I've seen it happen when I've worked on amateur promotions at weigh-ins. Guys, I've had dudes that challenge each other to MMA matches, or fights get made even at the weigh-ins for other fight nights or events, right? So it's not uncommon for a guy that wants to fight another dude to come up and say, hey, when are we getting this on? Kind of get up in his face, but again, have that kind of neutral body language where it's like, I'm confident, but I'm not trying to fight you right now. I don't think, though, that Jamal necessarily had that solid of a plan in his head when he walked up. It didn't really seem like he was pressing forward. Like, people were holding both men back, which makes sense because he has a fight coming up with Garry. Why put that in jeopardy? I think that's actually one of the dumbest things he could be doing, and I think it's a dumb thing currently he's doing right now is giving any amount of attention to the fight that is not Garry Prochazka, because Garry Prochazka is an absolute ninja. And if your focus wavers in the least bit in a fight against him, you can run the risk of getting slept. It's going to be a dangerous fight for Jamal, and I think there's a way that he wins that fight. But man, going up to Alex Pereira, the dude that knocked you out, trash talking him to his face, and then kind of backing off when he challenges you to a spar when you know you have a fight coming up anyways, it doesn't really seem smart. I think Jamal Hill, what it is his ego is bruised right now on a fundamental level. He brings that competitive nature that we see in other sports like the NBA, MLB, and the NFL to fighting, right? A lot of times in fighting, it's supposed to be customary that you show respect to your opponents after they beat you and, learn from your losses, become a better man, become a better fighter. And then at some point, if Jamal can strap 3 wins together, he can face Alex Pereira again after the people are satiated and happy to see him kind of get back in there. But again, I see Jamal kind of take this angle where it's almost like the NBA. There's an excuse for why you lost. Someone was here, someone was there, it should have been. It almost reminds me of sports fans. We didn't play bad. You guys had the refs whistle all night. That's the vibe that I get from Jamal Hill, quite honestly. And I think a lot of people in the fighting community are not really used to that because they are used to the honor of giving someone the respect after they beat you and the gravitas that comes with getting knocked out by someone, right? Because it just, and for good reason, it rubs a lot of people the wrong way when you get starched in the way he did and then you keep talking trash. It's customary that you keep your head down. And again, I got into all the process there, but yeah, it's customary just to put in that work and become a better fighter, not to try and get one back and over on a guy when he's hitting a workout in the PI. Honestly, again, that goes to my theory that Jamal just went in there, probably saw him, honestly, was walking around getting food or something, had just gone through a workout of his own or was just starting one, wanted to get his big moment. Was the execution there? Absolutely not. It was a stinker of a moment for him and a moment that I think only tanks his stock in the eyes of the fans tenfold. Jon Jones finishes Stipe Miocic in round number 3 of their UFC 309 main event spot this past weekend. And my God, did I not expect for Jones to struggle to finish Stipe. The spinning back kick was awesome. That was a great finish. I mean, the way that Stipe collapsed, Jones closes in for the ground and pound. I mean, it was, I think, vintage Jones, right? Because one thing that always stands out about him, and we'll get into whether or not he should really even be facing Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall in a second. One of the things I've always appreciated about Jones is his creativity. His striking is god-awful. His boxing, at least. Let's just say that. Leg kicks, really, really solid. His boxing, though, is about as awkward as it gets. Stipe was landing on him, was even giving him trouble in that second round. Jones, and I've said this before, I don't think if he had average height and size and wasn't as creative as he was, he wouldn't be the GOAT. We wouldn't be having a conversation like this, but because he is so naturally gifted, we do have these discussions about him being in the position where he's in. He struggles to put away Stipe, finally gets the job done again with more of that patented creativity, but he now has a fork in the road ahead of him in Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall. Both are interesting fights. I think a lot of people looking at this fight, though, between Stipe and Jon would be crazy to assume that Jon would be able to stand up with either Tom or Alex. I mean, Pereira is a nightmare matchup for Jones, considering the Jones that we just saw in there. Now, I don't know if he'd go back down to light heavyweight or if they'd have Pereira challenge for the heavyweight strap, which could be an interesting fight. You know, either way, I don't think he's trying to stand and bang with either man. I think what Jones should focus on, whether it be either of these fights, is taking the fight to the ground, using his creativity, those oblique kicks. I mean, that sweep that he set up off of his oblique kick early in the fight was probably one of the cleanest things I've ever seen. But that's what Jon is good at. Now, if you ask me what I think is just and right, which again doesn't always, and I've made videos about this in the past, doesn't always sell tickets in the fight business, you give the shot to Tom Aspinall, right? Tom Aspinall is not as big of a name, and so the UFC's not getting behind him on this, but everyone seems to love him. You have the much bigger name, though, in Alex Pereira, which I think the UFC would be much more apt to go with in this circumstance. I don't hate either fight. I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I do think that it's pretty nonsensical that Jones wouldn't just fight Tom Aspinall if he's so concerned with legacy. Pereira's a nice legacy fight. In fact, maybe a better legacy fight now that I'm thinking about it than Tom Aspinall would be. I think the main issue that a lot of people have with this is that, yeah, Tom's not getting the shot that he deserves. And I believe that to be true. I mean, you think about it, he's sitting there, interim champ. Every law in combat sports dictates the fact that there should be an interim champ versus champ matchup once the champ is willing and able to fight. And we saw that. Jones last night was able to go out, show he's fit and ready to go. He looks better in his heavyweight frame than he did the first time around when he fought Gone. So why aren't we seeing this interim title bout? I don't know. It's less of a respect thing. It's more about the integrity of the sport. I think if Jones maybe wanted to face Alex Pereira, he should just vacate the heavyweight belt at this point. Besides, if we're going off the logic that Jones has previously stated that he just wants this fight for the legacy aspect, then he's had his cake and eaten it too. Why should he now hold on to the heavyweight belt when we don't know if he's going to be defending it? And is he really going to defend it against guys like Sergey Pavlovich and Volkov? No, he's not going to do that. He's looking for, in his own words, fun fights and big fights. Alex Pereira is the big fight right now at light heavyweight. So why doesn't Jones just relinquish the belt? Probably, again, it's something where there's bargaining chips, logistics that I'm not thinking about right now because I'm running off of 2 hours of sleep. But yeah, to me, it actually makes more sense the more I think about it for him to just vacate the heavyweight title, fight Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight strap. Jones has been known to be a light heavyweight GOAT, if not a GOAT of the sport. It would kind of be like a homecoming for Jones. And to me, that makes way more sense. I don't think it's as dangerous as a matchup ground-wise as Tom Aspinall would be, but it's a high-profile fight. Alex Pereira certainly stands a chance, if the fight is standing, of absolutely sending Jones to the shadow realm. And I think there's enough juice there for sure that you could justify that fight. Again, we're in the fight business, so it's not about what's right and what's moral and you know what the fighters deserve. And I've tried very hard with a couple of videos to, a lot of people's just made to get my viewpoint on this across. We're in the business of selling fights. We're not in the business of making what's best for each of the fighters. That plays a role for sure, but Dana's looking at also what makes a lot of money, and I think that Alex Pereira fight is mucho cash. I'd be jazzed up about that fight. I'd be jazzed up to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall just the same, but Alex Pereira, in the short time that he's been in the sport with the resume that he's already built, there is definitely an argument, especially with the mental gymnastics that Jon Jones has been making about fighting Stipe, to where you could say, yeah, you know, Alex Pereira in some circumstances would be more of a legacy fight than Tom Aspinall. I don't think that that's that crazy of a thing to say. It's also just a dangerous thing for Jon. I feel like Maybe the one thing that wouldn't help Pereira out is the fact that we've seen historically Jon has struggled with volume punchers and guys that really take it to him, like Dominic Reyes, Stipe Miocic in that second round, and Lyoto Machida until Lyoto Machida got caught. Alex Pereira starts off slower, but once he feels like he has you hurt, then he'll rush in and look for the finish. So I feel like the fight between him and Jones would guarantee great kickboxing early and perhaps another finish. Who's to say? I mean, I think the more I talk about it, the more I'm interested in building this fight up. I think Aspinall would be a great fold for Jon at heavyweight, but ultimately, and I hate to say this over and over again, it's not up to us fans. A lot of the time, we cloud our judgment with guys that we don't like. I'll be the first to say it, I don't like Jones at all. I think he's a scumbag. I think he does not deserve anything that he has. He's a great martial artist, very creative, like I said, naturally gifted athlete, but he's also a scumbag. Right now, it's up to him. He calls the shots. He's got the heavyweight strap. He's who many people consider to be the GOAT of the sport, so he does not have to listen to any of the fans right now. And that's something I think we need to wrap our heads around, as annoying as that sounds to even say out loud. But listen, guys, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. It's been your boy, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Kuberman. And I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.